Hello everyone, welcome back to another Circle of the World video. Today we'll be discussing the Shanka. I found myself pondering the existence of the Shanka. It's not something that probably most people think about, but whenever you've seen them in action, it kind of haunts you. When you've seen men killed by such creatures, it makes you ask the question, why? The Northmen call them flatheads, a fitting name for their very flat heads. But in other ways, they are called the Shanka. That's what they are actually called. Their flesh seems to be melded with stone and metal and whatever they can fit into themselves, which has led other Adeptus historicals to speculate whether or not they are made and not bred. Although, when I had an interview with Jazal, his late majesty, he had said that Bias had told him that the Magi had pushed back the Shanka to the dark corners of the world, and that there they had bred. But breeding could just mean reproducing. It very well could be possible that they make each other, hence their weird sizes and shapes. Canadius had made them himself. He had put them together using earth and flesh and metal, so it would make sense that they put themselves together. But of course, this would also change a certain circumstance with how they are. Whether or not they put themselves together or they have sex. Both processes are unsettling to think about. Either way, it does present a question of how they operate with each other. Communally, they seem to have some sort of language. They jitter and make little barking sounds at one another. Sort of like a language, more like apes. More like animals. But they do know what each other are saying to each other, and they can communicate quite well. They're also capable of making weapons and armor, which would make sense since they are able to possibly put themselves together. They are the Maker's children in a way. But their role in Canadius's plans were to fight the Magi, or to defend him. So their self-preservation is something lacking. They seem to feel fear, though. They've cowered. I've seen them cower. But not out of self-preservation, but out of fear of just the emotional shock of being afraid. As a dog might fear its master when its hand is raised. This leads me down a thought process, is one that I did not think I would have for the Shanka, which is pity. They were created with a purpose, which is not something that we humans have, but their purpose is now gone. Their master is now gone. Perhaps they even know who their master was. They're hunted and persecuted, never to be understood. Truthfully, we don't know if they could be kind, or if we have just always treated them so poorly that they know nothing else. I wonder if there's a chance that the Shanka could be civilized, that we could coexist. But knowing how we are as human beings, I doubt it. In truth, they're inferior, many of which are smaller than us. They're definitely not as smart. And yes, they can make things, but their communication skills are lacking. In truth, if we even did try to coexist, humans would just use them, enslave them, So in a way, I'm glad that they have stayed out. They have their own little society in small places. The High King had also told me, when we had lunch one day, that to his great dismay, the Shanka were in Alcus, feasting on the flesh of all the dead there. Since nothing dies in Alcus, nothing rots, nothing lives, it makes sense that the Shanka hid there, eating the fleshes of millions from the old city. But that leads me to the dark side of the Shanka. They seem to be easily manipulated, as that witch, what was her name? Karib, the sorceress of Bethod, who has the long eye. Subject for another time perhaps, but she knew how to control them. And if my sources are correct, Karib lives, put back together by the Shanka. But I wondered, did the Shanka take her and do it out of pity, out of servitude? Or because Karib was the only one who actually showed them kindness? Black Rika seems to not be sure whenever I had spoken to her of it. She kind of brushed me off. Such a fun personality to talk to, but she seems not to care too much on the way things work, just so long as they're done. There are still many Shanka out there. Bethod had used them, and whereas many people think that Bethod perhaps used them just to win the war against the Union, or tried to, I believe he did do it for that purpose, of course, but he also did it to dwindle the Shanka's numbers. By the end, there were thousands of Shanka dead, which was the main reason that the Dogman and his crew had come down from the high places, was to warn Bethod of the Shanka growing in number in the high places. Still now, past the Corinner and in the far north and beyond, I'm sure there are still thousands of Shanka, many of which are probably content to stay where they are, but it makes me wonder, why do the Shanka come from the north? I'm sure there are some in the far south, perhaps on the Thousand Isles or Shibulion or Thond, in the wild regions of those places, but it's odd that in Alcus they have stayed put, not sought to venture out, as no one knew that the Shanka were there. But in the north they'd come down. Of course, I know that there is prejudice. Perhaps the Shanka in the north hate the Northmen, as the Northmen have always hunted them, and never left them alone if they do find them. The Shanka in the far north have always been the one to do the raiding. There was an old farmer, if I could remember his name, in the near country. He had told me that the Shanka had attacked his homestead over and over and over again, until finally they killed everyone in his village. And he lived north of the high places. He said that the Shanka came across the sea, which leads me to believe the Shanka in Alcus had meat. They didn't have to spread out. They could just sit there, breed, or put themselves together, whichever you like, and eat. Be content. But the Shanka don't think about overbreeding. They don't think about tomorrow. They think about what's then and now. Assume that in the far reaches of the north, beyond the sea, that there isn't much food there. It's too cold. So they came across the sea to eat, to find meat. They eat whatever. And as disgusting as it isn't cannibalism. We eat deer and other creatures all the time. The Shanka eat us, but only because we're meat. But anyways, I believe the Shanka only spread out because they run out of room, which is ironic since, well, we do the same, taking everything in our path to make sure that we have room to expand our own people. I can't blame the Shanka are wanting to expand their lands to be able to hunt more. It seems that everything the Shanka does are in their nature. Where we humans can defy our destiny and choose what we want to do even if it's bad for us, the Shanka are more like animals. Which is a fear. Since the Shanka can be controlled, as Karab had done it, and henceforth Bethod had done it, Canadius before that, with all the thousands of Shanka around in the world, in the high places, beyond the seas, in Alcus, perhaps in the far south in caves and such. I fear that some power at be will be able to control them, to manipulate them. Perhaps not Omegas. They hunted them down after all, but someone else or something else. The Shanka have been forgotten about here in the Union. Even the soldiers that were there at the battle, like myself, seems like a distant memory, something that was almost a dream, something that never actually happened. So I fear that we are all ill prepared for it. If someone did use the Shanka, and they used them all at once in coordination, similar to how Kara did it. Safe to say that in the Union we have no fear of such things. But the future is never certain. I just hope that one day my writings may help those to understand the Shanka. Even if it's just speculation, perhaps maybe one day we'll learn to coexist. Or perhaps one day they will do good and help us fight whatever is out there. Or perhaps my writings will just be turned to evil purposes and they will be enslaved by magic once more, never to decide their own fate. But I believe that the Shanka could change their own fate. They can make choices like we can. They can forge. They can fight. They can breed and they can communicate. The future is never certain, but the past is.